Welcome to the WUN series, which is a series of podcasts with WUN partners exploring the issues in the utility sector. I'm Sarah Hopkins. I'm a board member of Women's Utilities Network, and I also run my own consultancy, Pathways People Solutions, which supports organisations with all things to do with people and culture. I'm here today with an amazing panel to talk about culture. So welcome, everybody. Could you introduce yourself? Stewart, would you go first?
Hi there, I'm Stewart Green. I'm the VP for Strategy and ESG at Gentrack Group.
I'm Jen Hughes, co-founder of the Marketing Pod.
Hi, and I'm Kirin Kalsi. I'm the Director for Legal Compliance and Data Protection at E.ON UK. E.ON UK is an energy retailer with about 10,000 employees in the UK.
Thanks, everyone. I hope everybody's ready for a great conversation. Today's discussion is on creating inclusive cultures, which is really important for us at Women's Utilities Network. It's one of the areas that we're really focused on. It was the focus for our report and research earlier this year on the power of culture. So I know you guys are all familiar with that, and we're going to dig into some of the really important issues that we cover in there today. So is everyone ready to get started?
Yep.
So first question I'm going to put to you, Kirin, if that's okay, which is, why does inclusion matter specifically in the utility sector right now?
I think right now it's quite easy to think that, it doesn't matter anymore. But I was reading some of the WUN research and surveys over the last couple of years. And it was only in the survey last year when the audience effectively was saying that over 50% of women felt that they were being disadvantaged because of their gender. And if that is the survey results, as in 2024, then that is quite a clear sign that there is still some work to be done. Lots of work has been done over the last few years in the utility sector. And even just from our perspective, I can say, we've introduced menopause support. We've won accreditations for these areas as well. We're very much into flexible working and people having the right to request flexible working from day one. So there's been a lot done over the last few years, but the survey clearly shows that there's still work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I particularly recognise from our research and the report, but also in cultures in general, when I'm working with organisations, is colleagues reporting a say-do gap. So lots of organisations, not just in the utility sector, having strong values, having good, strong purposes, lots of good policies in place to support colleagues when they're in the workplace on their journey. But actually, colleagues' experience is different. And that very much comes out of the report that we did earlier this year. And some examples of more statistics, building on what you just said, is that nearly 70% of respondents said that their leaders take culture seriously. But then actually, when it transpires to people's experience, nearly 60% of respondents said that they had observed inappropriate behaviour in the workplace, for example, not being addressed. And 50% of respondents said that poor behaviour was just dismissed as banter and that it shouldn't be taken that seriously. So that's a couple of examples, I guess, of organisations feeling like they're doing the right things, but actually lived experience is a little different. So I think one of the things that's really important when it comes to that is values, but actually values not just being on a wall, values being something that's really lived. So Stu, I'm really keen to understand your view on the importance of values and how that needs to show up in this context.
Yeah, I think that values they're set by the leadership, first and foremost, but not just set, acted and lived by the leadership. And really, the buck stops at the top, ultimately. There's a phrase that I use time and time again, which is the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And I think that is, that adoption of that into organizational culture allows them to live their values. And if you start seeing that at the top levels, it permeates throughout the organization and then becomes true rather than just being a set of, nicely cut vinyls on a wall to look like a PR message. It actually becomes true to what that organization is and then drives and creates growth from that to push and explore new areas.
We're all role models, I think, essentially. And in leadership teams, especially if we're talking about culture is something that is lived and breathed by people. You have to demonstrate that if you are how you behave and how you want people to behave, you need to demonstrate that and really live and breathe that, because as you say, you can put it on a wall and it can be beautiful and it can be beautifully thought through and woven into policies and procedures, but unless you are living and breathing that and demonstrating those behaviours as a leader, people won't follow that and it will seem less authentic.
Yeah. One of the things we hear often is leaders saying, that I've never noticed that happening. I've never heard those things being said. How do we think that leaders or how do organisations or colleagues in organisation help their leaders to see some of these things and understand them as being real, not just kind of gripes and moans? Anybody got any thoughts on that?
You've got a real win with the power of storytelling here, and having people open and share those experiences, being willing to share the experiences where they've been subject to unacceptable behaviours, and that makes it real. That makes it tangible. I've seen it through other mechanisms where people will use stories and a bit of a stick mode, where a financial implication as a result of these bad behaviours in a workplace affect the bottom line of a company. But I think that's probably a bit extreme. I think if you can focus on how do you get the best out of your people to get a high performing team that feels inclusive and feels engaged, and it's about culture and values at the genesis of that formation, then it's got to be done by living those, driving those, and sharing those stories of where we get it wrong and owning where we get it wrong as well.
Yeah.
Because it's not idealistic. It's not a journey of pure perfection. There will be times when it drops and things get wrong. It's a response, the integrity and the moral fibre when that's being responded to that really makes the difference. And that's what's remembered.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the thing. It's how the thing was dealt with and what the response was. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's also quite difficult for leaders sometimes to really know how to respond. And I think that's where organisations really need to help with that cultural piece. And it's quite easy to have instances where colleagues do feel comfortable speaking up, but then are really uncomfortable with anything being done about it. And lots of people then make the request, well, I don't want you to take this any further. Oh, I don't want anything to be done with this. And leaders are a bit stuck then with what to do. And we had one or two of those instances quite a few years back now. So we used that as a trigger to start our Speak Up campaign.
Okay.
And the big piece about that campaign was it wasn't just about speaking up. There was a big element about when people speak up, we also need to listen and as leaders need to act. And a big element of the upskilling and awareness raising we were doing was not just around how you can speak up, but in particular giving leaders the tools around how to then have a conversation with a colleague that felt uncomfortable with then anything being done with what was being discussed. And we did a whole range of things. We had some celebrity guest speakers, a very famous author on the topic and a famous whistleblower as well. We did the usual posters and roadshows as well. And the roadshows were very interesting because we had lots of people then coming up individually to talk to the people who were doing the roadshows. And we did it jointly with our HR colleagues. So it was a compliance and HR joint activity. And within about 9 months of kicking off that activity, we saw a 200% increase in notifications that came through, which we saw as a great success. A lot of organisations may look at and say, oh, we don't want notifications to come through, but we saw this as a great success.
Yeah. I'm just curious, you've given a really good example there of your campaign. Clearly our listeners are going to be thinking, that sounds great, but we might not have the same budget or the same reach within an organisation that you guys had. Do you have a first step that people could take if they were really thinking about how do they tune into that sort of thing in their organisation?
Yeah, a really easy step is peer-to-peer support. And provided you set that up correctly, that self-generates. And we've used that a lot for our menopause working group. So I'm the exec sponsor of our menopause working group. And we've done a joint awareness raising, but also our peer-to-peer support. We run monthly cafes. Yeah. And we find the information exchange and storytelling and people being able to share their experiences is the most powerful tool that we can use. Sometimes the person running the cafe will have a topic just to keep the conversation going. But every single time they've found there's at least half the people joining the session that are literally just soaking up, not not actually contributing, but just soaking up what other people are explaining, stories they're telling, what their experiences was. And at the end of it, just saying, look, that was just so helpful and such a relief to be able to hear people talk about it. And peer-to-peer support does not cost anything. That is something that you can really do on a low budget.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you. And I think absolutely I agree that sometimes just sharing your experiences and realising you're not alone is the first step, isn't it? Yeah, for sure, definitely. Great, thank you. I guess I'm just keen to move on now just to think about allyship. So that's something else that WUN is really sort of focusing on and has been over the last number of years. And we touched on it a little bit earlier on in terms of how can we as Women's Utilities Network or individual utility organisations think about how do we encourage allyship, particularly when people are worried about saying the wrong thing? And we have a situation where if we're encouraging, in this example, men to be stronger allies for women, that men are just sometimes a bit nervous, and this is a sweeping statement, but men can be nervous at stepping in and saying, the wrong thing because they think they may, use the wrong language or the wrong terms or whatever. So how do we, where people are nervous, how do we encourage people to be better allies? And is there anything more we can be doing to support men in particular? And I'm obviously going to pass this question to you, Stu.
I think get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I'm a staunch ally myself, but I still get nervous. Am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to get this right? How do I position this before I engage in a conversation or attend an event? But I think, recognise your own privilege and your own position. Come with curiosity. Come with, openness and curiosity to engage and learn. Don't pretend to know it all. And also remember what you're doing it for, which isn't about yourself. It's about, the individual that you're trying to support or the cause that you're trying to support. And I think as long as those lenses are sort of orientated correctly, you're probably okay to fail and maybe stumble a few times and put your foot in your mouth if it's a learning experience or journey for you. Don't be afraid of that. Embrace that, and have that dialogue with that group, with that organisation after to say, look, I was trying to come from this place. How do I get to that place? And generally, from my experience, you'll find that as long as you've explained it and understand it, that they understand that your moral compass is correctly aligned, and actually there's no malice or ill intent. You're just trying to do the best thing and actually really help you on that journey. And then here's the kicker. Share that knowledge. Don't just sit on it, because there'll be other, allies to your left or right that could make the same mistake. So I always think, right, okay, what did I learn from that? How can I share it? I'll give you a very, very brief example. I was supporting a neurodiversity conversation. I work with one of our ERGs only last week, and I was just listening. And I go to listen to learn and observe. And one of our colleagues referred to the fact that they really hate the phrase, "Oh, I'm just a little bit OCD." And they suffer from, they're clinically diagnosed with OCD. It's a very serious issue for them. And they said, I really hate the phrase of people just flippantly turn around and say, oh yeah, I'm a little bit OCD because I've done the moniker from Friends and put my shoes together or whatever that's going to be, sort of scenario. And I, in my head, thought, I actually say that, flippantly without thinking anything. I was like, oh, I'm a little bit OCD. That's why I've got to have a straight line there or whatever it is. Without any concept that was going to offend someone that is clinically diagnosed with OCD. So those little nuggets, those little pearls that we pick up on the way definitely will make life easier and open the conversation up more and make us as allies better to support, marginalised groups.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that goes for us all, right? We all say things like that, they've become part of our language and the things that we say. And actually, as we become more educated on topics like this, we realise that we are in those situations and we might say things inadvertently, with no malice that might, offend people or really, upset them. And, that's the whole conversation about microaggressions, isn't it? And I think there's lots of learning to be done in organisations about microaggressions. And I'm guessing E.ON must have done some stuff on microaggressions.
We have, yes. As part of the Speak Up campaign, we ran an e-learning program around, we called it Respect Matters, and it covered a variety of topics, but included microaggression. And I remember when we first rolled it out, a lot of people viewed it and the feedback was, oh, I didn't realise, similar to what you said, Stu, I didn't realise that saying something like this could actually be quite difficult for somebody who then hears it on the other side. We've now taken that one step further, and you mentioned active bystander. We're now rolling out an active bystander program, because even though having an increase of notifications was great, because we felt we could then tackle instances and deal with instances that people felt uncomfortable about, we realised that there's only a limited amount you can do. And in order to really improve and develop that culture of being able to speak up in the moment, that's the piece we really want to tackle and get to that space of psychological safety where people can raise items that they feel uncomfortable about there and then in the moment. So we're rolling out this training to all of our colleagues, and we've decided to go for face-to-face training because we've decided that that's the best way of bringing across the content for this. We've already trained 1,000 of our employees, and we have already seen the number of concerns raised from that area drop substantially, because colleagues are feeling much more comfortable either raising it themselves or supporting others in the moment. And that is really the next piece we are focusing on.
It's incredibly hard, though. I always struggle with the active bystander piece, because there isn't necessarily a silver bullet to fix this problem, right? About how do you push back against, or risk, being perceived to push back against an organisational challenge. And also it's intimidating. If you're a very junior member of staff and you've got I can recall a personal anecdote from a long time ago where I was an incredibly senior, we'd literally prepared for about 2 weeks for this meeting with this very, very senior individual man. And we're all there, and the top brass are there, and I was with some female leaders in the team. Loads of prep for it, and the first thing that he walks in the room and says, "Oh, isn't this a pretty room?" referring to the female colleagues. There was no one in that room that was going to challenge a 3-star general. There was no one going to challenge it. And you sit there and go, "I wish I had the moral fight." I mean, 16 years down the line, I still remember that as the moment I failed to address that. But I wasn't going to challenge a 3-star general. So I think it's great, and there's real value in building that momentum. I think there's a bite of reality that we've got to be uncomfortable about and realistic about how do we get the most junior person against the most senior person at a board level or exec level.
Comfortable.
Yeah, comfortable and safe and confident
to
call it out. Right? Yeah.
But I think, Stu, there's also a piece around your senior leadership needs to live and breathe it as well. So in that instance, there's no point in doing lots of training if you've then got somebody so senior turning up and basically
I think that's
undermining the whole piece, and that's what you really need to work on. So I mean, we've done even interviews with our board members on Speak Up. What are their views? So you really need to emphasize that this is not just talk, but that this is something that people, it's really a core value, not just of, some people in HR and some people in some teams, but it's a core value of the board, it's a core value of the exec, and it basically needs to filter all the way down from the top.
And that's where wellbeing washing has come in, and we saw that in the surveys as well. So wellbeing washing is saying, there are lots of policies about wellbeing, and it's interwoven into all of the values that, we're shown and expected to live and behave like at work. But actually in that example, and there will be thousands of examples like that, where you see behaviours that just aren't demonstrated by those leaders. And it is, you can't have people saying one thing but behaving the exact opposite. And I've seen that so many times.
Yeah, and that's back to the say-do
so
gap.
Many times.
I know we're going to come on later, I'm sure, to talk about different generations in the workplace, but I think inevitably expectations are changing as well, aren't they, in terms of people that have worked in the sector or just worked for a long time, and people that are coming newer into utilities or just into work. Actually, their expectations are different. And I think organisations that are really stopping to think about the generational differences, I think are, going to start to uncover some of those things. It's really interesting as well, I think, to me. Obviously, you talk about E.ON Speak Up campaign because WUN have a Speak Up campaign as well. They're not the same thing, but they've got a great name which we share clearly. And I guess it's just incumbent to kind of pick up on that point as well, because our experience at WUN is very similar to that exact example that you just gave, Stu, around we were at an awards do a couple of years ago as Women's Utilities Network, and some of our guests arrived. A table of men said, "Oh, here comes the entertainment," and that was a couple of years ago. And that's where our Speak Up campaign came from. So we as a board and our group of advocates reflected upon that as that's something that we've all experienced in some way, shape or form. And it's not a one-off. These things happen all the time, and we shared our experiences. So what we've been trying to do as WUN is similar to you, Kirin. It is around how do we talk to leaders, not just in HR, but very much in terms of the C-suite leaders in the sector, to help to educate them about the reality of some things that do happen in the sector still. And then also, to your point, how do we then upskill more junior people or just, women that work in utilities to get themselves into a place where they feel safe and they know what to do when a situation like that might happen to them. It's not an easy nut to crack, as you've said, because actually, it is it's very situational. All situations are going to be different. But that's what we're trying to achieve at WUN, is kind of this kind of cross-sector piece to start these conversations, to hold a mirror up to organisations about the reality, but then also at the same time helping women to feel much more confident in knowing what to do when they are faced with that situation as well.
I think just to add to that, we feel quite fortunate at E.ON. We've got 3 of our 7 exec board members are women. So there was a piece around that then shapes the culture at board level and then all the way down. And then 37% of our exec are women. So again, that just shows that picture to the whole organisation. And we run a Women in Leadership programme, a sort of training programme, which tends to be oversubscribed absolutely every single time they go out. And we've seen an increased promotion rate for women as well as a result of that. And those statistics and those numbers just really help to show that we're not just talking about it, but we're actually delivering on what our values are in that space.
That's really great to hear. And obviously, I guess you guys are sort of holding up that kind of proof points. But I guess not all organisations are like that. They're not all sort of have got that kind of level of gender diversity at the senior level. And I think when we talk about speaking up, back to the WUN report, I think it was something like 35% of women said they didn't feel confident in speaking up when they saw inappropriate behaviour. So Jen, I'm going to come to you. How do we in the sector create the business case, the sort of commercial angle really, for organisations that kind of they haven't got on the bus yet with this type of thing? What's your view on that?
Okay, I think there is a real business case for it as well. We all want to work somewhere where we feel included and it's lovely culture, but there's a real commercial angle as well. I think it was 75% of respondents in the survey said that salary was not the number one consideration anymore in where they want to go and work. And actually, if you want the best talent, you want the most dedicated, committed people, they will go to those organisations where they feel empowered and can thrive and included and part of, a forward-thinking organisation. So in terms of attracting, retaining and keeping those individuals, then you're going to have to get on that bus and you're going to have to start to make sure that your policies and procedures are lived and breathed by everybody, because those individuals will not stay. They will not stick around in those organisations where they feel they can't speak up or stifled, or they don't have those promotion prospects in the same way. They just will leave and go elsewhere. And in the last survey, 1 in 3 women said they were leaving the sector. So as a sector, we have to really look at that and say, okay, how do we keep these brilliant people, not just women, these brilliant people within the sector? And that's why you have to, you've got to get on the bus and make sure you're part of it.
Yeah, definitely. Any other thoughts on that?
Can I just... We've, for the first time this year, went for Best Places to Work, and we were voted number 1 for Best Places to Work for the younger generation. I think it's the under 30s or under 25s, I think, in that group. And we had record number of applicants for our apprenticeship programme, a graduate apprenticeship programme. And when you talk to them, the feedback we've had is that how getting that Best Places to Work accreditation for them gives them a mark of, okay, this is the type of place I want to work and I want to apply to. So it's a real generational piece as well, that it does attract the right type of people.
Absolutely.
And the sort of new entrants into the industry as well.
Absolutely. We're obviously a smaller business, but we've been a great place to work for the last 3 years. We're top 10 for women and wellbeing as well. And actually that has brought new recruits to the organisation that we would not have attracted before, because they are deliberately looking for those organisations.
we've got
Absolutely.
exactly the same experience.
Yeah.
What do you think? Yeah, we've heard a lot of great examples about why E.ON would be in that place. What makes Marketing Pod, that great place to work for women?
I think it's culture.
Yeah.
And if you ask the team, they would undoubtedly say it is the culture. And it's because we deliberately set out, even when we founded the company 12 years ago, for it to be a really flexible place to work, a really inclusive place to work. 2 women founders with children. We understand what flexibility really means and how you should be able to do your role really, really well, and go and do the things you need to do at home as well. So we have lived and breathed that. It is in our DNA as we've grown, and we've maintained that. And the recruitment of people and them aligning to those values is a huge part of that. And if they come in and they can't quite fit those values, then they don't stay. So I think it would absolutely be around culture.
Yeah, and I think for me, there's something around organisations that recruit based on values. That's much more the done thing these days.
Absolutely.
But for me, it's about recruiting on values, but what can people bring? What's the value? What's the culture add, not just the culture fit, but flexibility. I'm glad you raised that. I think that's a really important theme as well when it comes to culture. And I'm curious for you all just to share with me what flexibility means to you guys.
For me, it's trust. Actually, it's trust and empowerment. So do what you need to do, get your work done, cut your details. You need to cut your detail. But at the end of the day, that through trust and empowerment, you burn your equity once, and we're on a different conversation. But trust and empowerment is that flexibility with my teams.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. So I don't feel guilty if I want to go and watch a sporting game that my children are in, and I would never want my team to feel guilty either, because I know I'll come back and do my job. I know I'll get the things done that need to be done, and if I trust them to do the same, and they do, then they should never feel guilty about wanting to go and do those things, and they make that work. So yeah.
There's not much more I can add. I think it definitely boils down to trust. I think it's very much, there's a give and take around it as well. But I think especially, and I think that's probably the one positive that's come out of the COVID pandemic, is that remote working has become so easy because every organisation has set itself up, and even smaller companies set themselves up now with you could work from anywhere, really. So there is a piece around if somebody needs to leave early, or, lots of organisations do hybrid working, there is that flexibility there, and it just needs to make sure that it fits in with people's personal objectives, but also with the business objectives. And it's very easy to have the two align now, whereas it was a lot more difficult when remote working was a bit more was sort of the rare exception.
And we all did it overnight when we absolutely had to, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing,
we all went home and that was it.
And we had to make it work. I think it's something about flexibility though, isn't it? Where it's not just, we've got a flexible working policy and you can apply to be part of that. And I know that, the laws changed to make it easier. And also it's recognising that it's not just about caring as well, because I think people often think about flexibility as, certainly it was always childcare, and now it's a bit more about parental care or elderly care, but actually it doesn't matter how old you are or what your family situation is or who you are or what your circumstances are, we all have a life outside of work, right?
Absolutely.
And everybody wants to do the things they need to do outside of work. So it's how you can, a flexible policy it needs to be flexible, just in the way that it's said, for lots of different circumstances. And I guess that brings me to a bit of an elephant in the room that we haven't got on to discussing yet, is the kind of global, change that we're seeing. And yes, everybody can work from home. Yes, hybrid working has been a thing, but we're starting to see some organisations reverse that, or certainly step away from that and mandate time in the office or returning to office. What are your thoughts on the impact that might have on organisational culture, and then I guess on women in particular?
I personally struggle to see how it can't impact culture if you demand that everyone comes back to the office, or you demand certain, asking for certain things is fine within kind of flexible boundaries. So core working hours or whatever that might be is fine, but demanding that everyone comes back to the office when people have built their lives around what happened with COVID and us all going home. So I cannot see how that doesn't impact culture. For example, if we tried to do that with our teams who are all over the place because they're miles away now, it just would not work. And I can't understand why. I can understand saying you need to be there a bit, and I can understand saying we do need to see each other as a team, and I can absolutely see the value in us coming back together a bit. I can see that. But to say you need to be in an office now 5 days a week, I just can't understand why you would need people to do that now.
Stu, anything to add?
I think probably all us four have a privilege where, you know, we're not on the line.
Yes.
Or we're not in a customer services centre.
Yes.
I've got to be, you know.
Yeah, it depends on your role. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I think it's because I share the same view, right? But I also at the same time, I get that, you know, some businesses have to do that to achieve that if they've got a production line or like I've alluded to. But I think it erodes trust, right? Because what you're saying is we did all right, the business said, well, I mean, if you look at a business that was succeeding over the last 3 years, why would you suddenly then roll back a policy? It suggests that you no longer trust people to do it, but your business was performing with it originally. So why the change and shift? I think the bigger question actually is the expectation of employers to carry more now. So you know, we talk about trust; it's a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
So you know, there's a viewpoint that given the fall of, you know, the rise or the fall of the popularity of the church, for example, in the younger generation or in cultures, that the parish sort of community, that employers now have to pick up that element of you know, parishional care to individuals. Where that, you know, I can think of plenty of times where we didn't, you know, if an employee had an issue with gambling, it wouldn't be raised at work. It's a personal matter. Whereas now it becomes a company matter. So there's, you know, how can in one hand you be a sort of duty of care supporter and enabler, and the other hand you're sort of hitting with a stick and trying to get them to force to come back into the workplace? And that's the conflict point that needs to be resolved. Yeah.
And I guess for me, totally understand. I worked for 25 years in gas distribution, so I know what it's like to have frontline, you know, colleagues, and you know that there's no option for remote working in that respect, and I get that. However, there can be flexibility to a certain extent. So I think, you know, there is definitely a distinction to be had there. But I think that idea around, you know, we have to treat everybody the same isn't quite there anymore. It's about allowing a framework within which people can operate. And in order, back to your point, Jen, about how do we then attract and hold on to the you know, the best
talent.
people.
You'll lose them, right? You'll lose them.
Yeah, you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
You do that, your big talent pool is going to go, right, well, I'm going to go find somewhere else.
Find somewhere I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think about sort of bringing it back then to the industry and kind of where we are, we've talked around a lot of different things. If we think about the industry more generally, thinking about culture and where we are now, what are the uncomfortable truths that the industry needs to face up to if it's going to keep moving forward and accept that there is still work to be done, and to continue to make change within the sector? Jen?
That there are still issues there, and I think we have to hold a mirror up to our behaviours and call them out when they are seen by people, because unfortunately those comments do still happen. Those things are still there. It's come a massively long way. It absolutely has. You know, in the last 20 years it's changed hugely, but I think it is unfortunately still true that there are leaders in businesses still behaving in ways that we should probably call out.
Yeah, thank you. How about you, Stu?
Complacency isn't an option. It's as simple as that. I'm scared. I'm genuinely, you know, quite not doom and gloom, but look, you know, we can see what's happening geopolitically and globally, and I'm trying to avoid this becoming a political conversation. but you see the rollbacks in EDI initiatives and efforts that are being made. You see the likes of, you know, the Andrew Tates of the world rising up and pumping information into young men, which is the next generation of workforce. So look, complacency is an option. We've got to keep going in this direction that we're headed. I think we've got to. The mirror thing is it is so powerful, and it needs to be done, and it needs to be just continuously pushed and done and narrated and supported. And as a man in this room, bring men into the conversation more and more, because 2 ears, willing to listen, willing to learn. Like, that is a way to challenge us and make this change.
Yeah. And I guess good conversations, right? So even, I've got a 14-year-old son. Yeah. So, you talking about information being pumped into young men, that's really, a thing that I think about a lot at the moment with a 14-year-old. And I've got a 16-year-old daughter. So I've kind of got it through the two lenses. So how do we, as a sector, or as humans, make the world a better place for those two young people that are going to be going into the workforce in the next few years? And I think, looking at it through both angles, is really important.
I think it's worthwhile remembering the industry has moved on.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But but we can't be complacent about where we've got to, because there's still work to be done. And there is a piece around, there's a societal piece that your workforce tends to reflect, and you need to therefore be able to deal with the behaviour that you as an organisation feel is unacceptable, and deal with it ideally in the moment or when it gets raised, because just sitting back and saying, oh, this is the way it is or how it's always been, that's just no longer acceptable, and just can't be tolerated.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to give you a bit of time to think about it while I talk. But I'm going to ask you a question about if there was kind of one thing that you could see the sector doing, recognising absolutely your point that much progress has been made over, the last number of years. What could we do to accelerate change? And whilst you think about your answers, as one of the things that we take really seriously is not just highlighting the issues to people, but how do we bring solutions as well? And that's the power of being in a room with you guys today talking about it, because I'm learning loads from you guys that I can take back into the WUN fold, and that will inevitably happen in all of these conversations. One of the things that we're doing as WUN is using a toolkit, because we come into contact with members, with partners, with specialists in all types of different aspects of diversity, gender diversity in particular, because we are the Women's Utilities Network, and being able to showcase some of the best practice that happens in organisations, or some shining lights of individuals that are, doing really well, whether that's new apprentices coming into the sector that are really making a difference, or whether it's initiatives in organisations, because we see it as part of our job, not only to highlight the kind of issues and the problems that are going on, but being part of the solution as well. So I think the more we can learn from each other and the more conversations we can have, the better. But what would your ask be of the sector in terms of accelerating change and keeping the momentum? I'm going to come to you first, Kirin.
Oh, that's a tough one. I think the one ask I'd have, and this might be a little bit in that sort of dream world piece, but every single organisation, and this is not just in the utility sector, is looking at AI and looking at AI tools and how AI tools can support organisations going forward. And the utility sector is no different. Utilities are going to be embracing it, are going to be looking at tools on how to both make work more efficiently, but actually do things differently using AI tools. And the interesting piece about AI tools is that if they're fed on what is currently out there, they tend to have an inherent bias. So what my dream would be is if we can take the bias out of AI, because then the AI tools would be so much more reliable from that perspective. But a lot of people don't even realise that there's inherent bias in AI. So you have to come back to storytelling around some organisations who, for example, used an AI tool to filter CVs. But because of the way the role description was written and because of the people they currently had in those roles, the AI tools basically decided, well, it was, for example, only male candidates that would be put forward because that was what the AI tool had been fed with. That's currently what is out there. So it's opening up that sort of Pandora's box around AI tools are great if they're used properly, whether in organizations you then have that sort of human filter around it. But if we can get AI tools that are unbiased, that would be my greatest unlocker of my wish list, really.
I love that. Thank you. How about you, Jen?
I think it's around embracing the small things. I think we have a lot of programs around large organisational change. There's a lot of programs around Speak Up, and they're amazing, and that's brilliant, and we should have them. But actually asking about the small things, if you ask your team, we call them the coffee queues at work. So it's like, what are the small things, in the coffee queue that you'd moan about, the little things, the small things. And actually that uncovers quite a lot. So it's just about asking about some of the small things and actually they form part of a bigger picture sometimes. So embrace the small things.
I think that's important as well, isn't it? Because sometimes those things will get completely in the way of the bigger things, even in a big organisation that's, got lots of different initiatives on these things. Yeah, thank you. Stu, how about you?
Can I be greedy and have 2 wishes?
All right. Then. As soon as it's you.
Shy kids get no sweets, right? I think the first one is that more male leaders lean in and support. There's not enough of them in the events, there's not enough in the room. More male leaders need to get in and support and champion and storytell and support and listen to their female colleagues in co-work. It's about their stories to get context. And my second wish is for us to retain fortitude and resolve against an economy that's challenging and a time that is challenging. Because it's not a side of a plate issue, right? It's not, when it's all good and quiet, we can worry about diversity and inclusion and do some of that nice stuff that you sprinkle on top. It's not. It's baked in. It needs to be baked in. So when it does get hard and challenging, that it doesn't get cut to focus on other stuff and we revert to type, right? And those sort of risks to happen. So those are my 2 totally selfish wishes.
No, that's good. Thank you. Well, we're nearly at the end of our discussion, but I've got one final question, which is all around what gives you hope. So I'm just curious to hear, what is it that gives you hope about the future of culture and inclusive cultures in particular in our sector? I'm going to go in the same order. Kirin.
Oh, thank you. Can I say 2 things that give me hope?
Yeah.
I think the first thing is progress made over the last few years. Activities such as the Women Utilities Network, but also things that we've done within the organisation, such as our support for working dads, our support for the fertility network, for the menopause network. And those give me hope that people are looking at the right things and putting effort into those areas that 5-10 years ago, people weren't really talking about, weren't really surfacing what is the piece that we could support colleagues on here. The second piece that gives me hope is my eldest daughter has started work also in the utilities sector a year ago. And what gave me hope is that within a couple of weeks of joining, she was asked to be part of the planning committee for the Diwali celebrations. And I remember when I started work, people didn't talk about Diwali at work. It was just not a topic. And she was also asked to record a podcast for their internal women's network about what is it like to join the utility sector as a female graduate on the scheme. And those things gave me hope. And I did get her permission to mention this, just to be on the safe side. But those things give me hope that actually entrants into the utility sector now are having a different experience. Again, we shouldn't be complacent, but those practical elements just really give me hope.
Yeah, thank you. Amazing. Jen?
I think the youth give me hope. So younger generation, younger people coming into work, I think they come with no bias, no agenda, they don't have all of this previous learnt experience. They just come without it. And I think that's a fantastic thing. We should embrace that, and they definitely give me hope.
Thank you. And Stu, the final word goes to you.
I should say cheesy if I mention one, but what generally does give me hope is the really impressive female leaders in the industry that are continuing to push and drive this forward. And it is genuinely, from a lens, it's not a woman's lens, it is inspirational to see. And I see that echoed across both water and electricity, energy companies rather, and more broadly to services and SIs, etc. And it's just that movement, that drive, that tour de force it's really quite inspirational, and therefore, gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's the perfect way to end this, because ultimately WUN's reason for being is to support the utility sector to be one where women join, they stay and they thrive. And it's only through conversations like this and by support from people like you guys that we can do the things that we do. So a massive thank you on behalf of WUN to all three of you, to Kirin, to Stewart and to Jen, for your time today and for your honesty, your openness and your enthusiasm, I think, for the positive things that are going on in the sector and how we can support organisations to create inclusive culture. So thanks very much, all three of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.